My entire life growing up, I was told that my father was a horrible person. He abandoned me and my mom, and he was simply just toxic. Well, some things led to another, and about my 16th birthday, I found out my mother has been lying my entire life about the true identity of my dad. And he's not a horrible person. In fact, it's the other way around. I'm 20 and male and have a strange relationship with both my parents over the years. I don't remember a time when they were together, as my dad left when I was really young, and my mom went out of her way to make sure that I did not have a relationship with him. Growing up, the only side of their relationship I ever heard about was my mom's side, and so, obviously, it would be from her point of view. When I was a young child, I always took what she said as gospel. Because why would my mom lie, right? She told me that my dad did not want me and that he had left us so that he could have a new family with somebody else. She told me that he was mad that I was a boy when he really wanted a daughter, and so he left rather than have a son as his firstborn. She would go on and on about how if I've been born a girl, he probably would not have left, but I had let my mom down with my gender. When I was a kid, I obviously did not put together in my head that the gender I was born with had nothing to do with me. It's not like a fetus can even say, "Oh, I think I'll be a boy." It was only as I got older and studied science at school that I realized that it was not my fault and she was blaming me for something I had no control over. Over the years, everything I ever did that annoyed her would be put down to the fact that I was, quote, just like my dad. If I was more like my mom, she assured me that I would have been much better son. I grew up to resent my dad because my mom hated how much I looked like him. I assumed that the way I was being treated was his fault. I had no one else to ask about my dad as my mom was not close to her family, which I guess should have been a sign that she was not the angel she sold herself as. Over the years, we moved around a lot. I attended at least 4 different schools before I was 11. My mom never gave me a good explanation of why we had to move again, but when you're young, you don't question what your parents do. They're adults, so you assume that they know what they are doing. It was only after I moved out that I found out that my mom was running from, but that is for later. When I got older, and was in my teenage years, I guess you could say that I began to rebel against my mom, and begin to argue back with her. I was a typical teenager, I think. Hormones were kicking in, and I was angry at a lot of things. Now, when my mom screamed at me that I was just like my dad, I would yell back that I wouldn't know because I've never met him, and I was stuck with her. Between the ages of 13 and 16, all my mom and I seemed to do was fight. When I was 14, a letter arrived in the post which set my mom off on one of her rants. My dad had found out where we were and was taking my mom to court for access to me. My mom was so angry she was screaming that we would be moving again. I told her I did not want to move again. I told her I just want to meet my dad, and why can't I, and work out for myself whether he's a bad guy or not. She was adamant that she would not allow me to meet him, but I was determined and said that if she tried to stop this, I would run to the police station and tell them she was threatening to run away with me, when my dad had a court order. She was furious and locked me in my room for 2 days. I'm not sure why she thought this would help her case, because if anything, it made me more determined to meet my dad, and see why she wanted so badly to keep us apart. In the end, I had to promise that I would do as she said and get ready to move before she would let me go to school. I went straight to my favorite teacher and told him everything. Long story short, she was prevented from taking me anywhere, and we had to go to court. That's where I met my dad and his family for the first time. My mom was right about one thing. I was absolutely the spitting image of Dad. I never moved and had the same mannerisms as he did, and I could have been his clone in how I looked. In court, he smiled at me, and I could not see any sign of the monster my mom told me that he was. The court case went on for a few days because Mom was disruptive and refused to give some documents to her lawyer, which of course slowed everything down. Eventually, I was allowed to have my say, and I told the judge that I wanted to meet my dad and decide for myself if I wanted a relationship. The judge said that was a very reasonable suggestion, and so from that day on, my dad was granted visitation rights and I was allowed to form a relationship with my father. My mom was not happy and threatened to move us again, but the court order provided for that and she would be arrested if she moved me without updating the courts of our address. To start with, I met my dad on his own for short visits and he told me about his wife and kids. I admit, I was jealous that he had more kids because I remember my mom had told me he left because I was a boy. With his new family, his eldest child was also a boy. And that's what prompted me to ask why he had been so disappointed I was a boy, that he left me behind. My dad sat there stunned in silence and asked what on earth I was talking about. That was when all the years of being blamed for everything spilled out, and I told my dad everything that my mother said. How she blamed me for looking like him, and that she told me he hated that I was a boy and so he left. Well, my dad was absolutely shocked to the core, and for a while he didn't even speak. He told me that there were many reasons that he left, but that was certainly not one of them. He also said that he never wanted to lose contact with me, but every time he found where we were living, my mom moved us again and he had to start the search all over. Finally, he tracked us down and managed to get the court involved, and he said he was sorry he had not been there, but he hoped we could go forward now. Over 2 years, from the age of 14 to 16, I spent time with my dad getting to know his wife and my half-siblings, and then going home to my mom and putting up with the mountain of abuse for daring to go to Father's. Everything came to a peak on my 16th birthday. Sweet 16? Not so much. I was at home for the actual day with my mom, and then I was heading off to spend a few days with my dad that following day. My mother was in a foul mood all day. She was constantly criticizing me and telling me how useless I was. Her main reason was that I had no friends to invite to my birthday. Well, I did, but there's no way in heck I was bringing them home to my mother's house. So, I had plans with them when I was at my dad's, which I stupidly told Mother. That's when she slapped me hard across the face. It was so hard it busted my nose. And because I wear glasses, it broke them and gave me a black eye. I ran from the house and called my dad, who came and got me. Despite the screams and threats from my mother, I never went home again. I don't need to go into full details as it would make this an essay, but I spent the evening of my 16th birthday giving statements to the police and getting an emergency restraining order against my mom and permission to move in with my father ASAP. I was worried that his new wife and kids would resent me moving in, because let's face it, I have had 16 years of being told they all resent me and hate me. But it was completely the opposite. My dad's wife, Jess, hugged me and told me I was safe now. She helped clean up my face and made me the biggest mug of hot chocolate I have ever seen. My dad's house did not have enough bedrooms for me to have my own, but my half-brother Arlo, who was 14 at the time, made room for me in his room, and he was not in any way put out by it. My half-sister Saffron was equally happy to see me. It just felt strange but amazing to be surrounded by people who were actually worried about me. I've lived with my father for 2 years now, and it's absolutely amazing. I've not seen my mom much except on the odd times we come across each other in town or she sends me weird text messages. We moved into a larger house a year after I moved to my father's and Arlo got his room back. But we still hang out a lot as we share a love for gaming. I'm at a university now, but I still go home all the time as I am an hour away from them. I was still going to live at home, but my dad told me to go and enjoy the whole experience of college, which I'm doing, trust me. Or at least I was. Something has happened and I'm not sure what the heck to do, which is why I'm even writing this today. Yesterday I had a phone call from my dad asking me what on earth was happening and why bailiffs have turned up to the house looking for me. Well, I was stumped because I had no idea. I don't even have a credit card. My dad has enough money that I don't need one, and he always taught us not to rely on credit. I drive a beat-up old car and don't have many luxuries apart from my laptop and gaming consoles. My dad got the bailiffs to leave paperwork, and I'm heading home to talk to my dad soon. Like, what did I do? I'm terrified my dad will kick me out for this. This time for real, and I don't know what's going on. Any experience with this would help me. Updates number 1. I wish I could say that things have been sorted out, but if anything, it's worse. I have no idea what's going on, and my dad's arranged a lawyer for me to try to make sense of it all. On paper, it looks as though there's a lot of debt in my name, which I've taken out and then just not pay back. My dad sat me down and asked me to be honest with him. Had I been spending and not paying things back? I was so confused, and all I could say over and over was that I had no idea what was going on. I must have looked so confused that my dad believed me, which is good because I am telling the truth. I have absolutely no idea where this came from. The bailiffs left some paperwork, but that was not a lot of help as all it had on it was the amount, by the way, which was huge, and the company that they were collecting for, which was a bank for outstanding credit card usage. My dad decided that we needed a lawyer. If I had not run up his debt, then someone must have stolen my identity, which it's easier to do than it used to be thanks to everything being online. He said that he would support me through this, and there was no way we were paying back a debt that was not mine. But he did say that it was my last chance to admit if I was to blame. And although he would be angry I lied to him, he would still help me. I'm not ashamed to say I cried like a baby as I was so scared he would be angry at me for something I didn't do, just like Mother always was. Jess walked over and hugged me, telling me that they believed me and that I did not need to worry, and as they would be there for me. She has a really gentle voice, and she gives the best hugs ever. Honestly, no matter how bad things are, when Jess hugs you and tells you it'll be okay, you can't do anything but believe her. Over the years, I've wished so many times that Jess was my real mom and I'd grown up in her house instead of my mother's house. It would have been such a different childhood, and I'd recently asked if I could call Jess Mom. And well, that made her cry. I thought she was mad, but she was just crying because she was happy. We're going to see the lawyer this afternoon, so hopefully I'll have a better idea of what I'm facing. I'm worried sick that this will mean I lose my place at university or even ruin my credit score for the rest of my life. My dad said once we prove it's not my debt, that should be the end of it. I've found that I'm pessimist, and so in my brain I've already been thinking about what I have that I can sell to pay this off. All I can really do is wait and see what the lawyer says. Over the phone, he told us to go and do printouts of my bank statements information and any contact information that I have. You know, such as my phone, gaming fee contracts, anything that links back to my bank. I'm also getting proof of income, which is not much as my dad pays most of my stuff. I do have a part-time job at a coffee shop near the university though, but it doesn't pay much, and I mainly love it for the social aspect as it's a place where students come and hang out after work. And it is really a chilled environment. Luckily, I was already booked off work this week as I was planning to come home for Saffron's birthday. I have all my pay slips, and it's clear from my bank that most of my money I have is paid into my account monthly by my dad and Jess. There are definitely no thousands of euros sitting in my bank account. I do have a savings account, but that was set up by my father when I was a baby so that he could provide for me even if he never found me to show me. He never forgot me. That's easy to prove. It's paid in full by my father, as there's a clear paper trail from his accounts to mine, and I can't touch that money till I'm 21 anyways. It's there to help me when I leave university. We have everything ready, and no, it's just waiting to see my solicitor later. Well, after I talk to the solicitor, I'll let you know how it goes. Update number 2. I feel like I've done something wrong, even though I know that I haven't. I thought for a while even my own solicitor did not believe me. But I suppose a lot of people probably try and get away with what they owe by saying that it's not theirs. He looked over all the paperwork and he agreed that it did not seem that there would be any proof that I've run up debt all over the place. I've left this update until we got some further information, as otherwise I would just be saying the same as the last one again, denying it for me and not being able to explain further. So my solicitor sent off to get all the information from the bailiffs and found that there was a court case in process, so we got all the details from that. You would think that it could not get any worse, right? But once all the paperwork began to come in, we found out that there was debt in my name in more than one place. So, as far as I know, there are debts in my name for a bank in the form of 2 credit cards, a loan, and an overdrawn current account. There's a car loan in my name, but no car that we could find, until 3 days ago, which is where the court case comes in. It appears, quote, my car was involved in a hit and run and then dumped in a long-stay car park where it was happily running up parking fees for months before someone reported it to the cops. Because of that, I had a warrant out for me. Luckily, we contacted the police to explain that we had a case to look into before they turned up at my university and dragged me away in handcuffs. It's like a bad dream. I also have 3 phone contracts in my name, all massively behind on payment, and I've taken credit with a lot of stores. Well, at least on paper I have. Now, we just need to work out who's living up to my identity. I've given so many statements and proven my identity so many times that I'm absolutely exhausted. We're all still just not any much clearer as to who's doing this, but my dad said that he thinks he may have an idea, but he won't let me know what he thinks. He went off to speak to my lawyer and the police without me. I've not been at university recently, and as I want to get this cleared up before I go back. How could I even study with all this hanging over my head? I'm sitting in a coffee shop writing this as I'm waiting for my father to come back from whatever he's doing. He said, well, he just thought things would get easier once he did something, but I can't see how. I had just finished that last sentence when my dad arrived with my solicitor behind him. They were both smiling, and I hope that was a good sign. I've added this to the update, but it happened a few hours ago. My dad sat down and said that he had been thinking about things and he was pretty sure he knew what happened. This is when he told me the real truth about what happened between him and Mom. When I was born, their relationship was already on the rocks, and he knew that it was not going to work out. My mom had changed a lot from the time he first met her and had become more like the person I grew up with. My dad had been the only one working, and my mom had started to spend a lot of money, which was more than he was able to earn. It meant that they had to take out credit cards and loans to make it through that time. My dad was working so hard to make sure the debt was paid, but my mom just kept spending. In the end, my dad challenged her and she threw him out rather than changing her ways. Then she ran away with me and he didn't see me until this court case. My dad said he had not wanted to accept that there was a possibility that, well, my mom has done these things to me that she did to him. At least when they were together, the debt was in her name. And, well, he took it on because they were married. If she was the one that had ran up all the debt, that she's gone even further this time, and she was using my identity to get money. which, as I'm sure you know, is, illegal. I tried to argue that there was no way that she would go that far. But then I also could not force myself to completely believe that it wasn't possible. After listening to my dad, I asked the solicitor what did we do next. He said that we would pass on the concerns to the police because if she was the one who did this, it was a crime and she had committed serious fraud against me. I had to admit that I was torn for a couple reasons. Firstly, it was my mom, and no matter what I didn't want to see her in trouble with the police. And secondly, I was worried that if we were wrong and she was arrested, and it turned out that she had not done any of the things we were accusing her of, it would make her behavior towards me even worse. I voiced these concerns to my dad and my solicitor, and they both reassured me that we could not leave these things between us, as I was looking at a considerable amount of debt, and we did not work out what happened. It could, very much ruin my life and credit score and get me into some serious trouble with lenders, as there was this hit and run with the car to consider also. That was the most serious threat to me at the moment. I think that was made me accountable and accept that we need to approach the police, as that was something that could give me a police record. I never really talked about this earlier, as all I knew was that there was a car purchased in my name that had been in an accident. That were all the details that we have been able to find before we got the solicitor involved and he spoke to all the creditors. And this led us to the police reports. I had already given my statements to say that the car was not mine, and also had been fingerprinted to check against the cars. As I have never been in that car, there should be no trace of me in there. That was still hanging over my head. Then it hit me. If my mom was in fact behind this, she still had access to some of my things, and I lived in her house most of the childhood. And there would be hairbrushes and things that I'd worn that could easily be placed in my car. My heart sank as I sat at the table and mentioned this to my father, who said it was more important than ever that we shared our concerns with the police. So, that's what we're going to do. Later today, I will most likely update this one more time once I know what the ending will be. There's no point until that time, as there's nothing more to say right now. Thank you so much for all the help in the comment section. Update number 3 will be coming up shortly. Update number 3. It's over. Hey guys, it's been a long time, but yeah, it's finally over. Until today, I was never really sure that it would actually go in my favor. But I can finally put this whole mess behind me and happily tell you that all I was cleared of is the wrongdoing. Even looking like my dad, which my mom did bring up in court as being my real crime. Yeah, even when facing charges of fraud and driving under the influence, she was more bothered about my looks. So this is a rundown of the plan my mom made to ruin my life for daring to look like my dad, and for moving away from her abusive form of parenting. It came out in court that this was not a new thing. Over the years, she had opened a few accounts in my name and used them to move money around from credit card to credit card, and she opened in her name and then withdrawn the cash from them. At first, she just used my name and identity to hide the money she was spending, as she had done with father when they were together. All that changed when I moved away from her. Following the time she slapped me, now she was just angry at how I looked, but also at the fact that I had dared to leave her just like Dad did. That's when she starts to seriously run my debt up in my name. I'd left her house with only a few clothing articles and things that were important to me. It had never occurred to me to get my birth certificate or any things linked to me. I was just glad to get the heck out of there. In court, my dad said that, he should have thought about that, but never thought his ex-wife would sink as low as trying to be, ruining her own child. I don't know the ins and outs of how she did it, but she managed to get a passport in my name. I've never even been abroad. using an old photo from my yearbook that she cut out. And she phoned the driving agencies to report my driving license missing, and of course got a new one, which did bring into question why none of these agencies bothered to check up. I mean, it's an easy way just to apply for things online these days, way too easy. Before long, she racked up over $30,000 worth of debt in my name. Even now, after it's all over, I don't know what she even spent it on, and don't think I'll ever find out. The worst bit in this is, which is hard to believe could get any worse, was definitely the car accident. Now, this is where she made a mistake, albeit a small one, which would not have been proof of anything if the whole case had not been linked together. So, she bought the car using money that she's taken from a credit card in my name, but she had been to the dealership in person. She told them it was a car for her son as a birthday present, and then from that point took out insurance and registered it in my name. She then drove it, which resulted in the accident. At the time of the accident, she had been drinking and was out with some people that she'd met in a bar. They were driving back to her house when she lost control and slammed into another vehicle, seriously injuring the other driver. Well, she then left, without even checking on them or admitting that she did it. They dumped the car in a long-term car park where it sat until the police found it. A car registered to me. After all this came out, we blamed my mother, and she swore blindly that it was my car, and that I was responsible for everything from the debt to the accident. Well, I was horrified and scared that the police would believe her. My solicitor, who was well worth the money, hired a private investigator, and that was the final nail in the coffin. On the day of the accident, there was no way I could have been driving, as not only was I at university, but I was working. And I was on security cameras at work at the time of the crash. Once they started looking more closely, it became pretty obvious, I guess, and they just found proof and witnesses that saw my mom in the car, and with the car. From that point on, between the police and the private investigator, they found a trail that showed that I had not opened any of the accounts or used any of the card's limits. They were able to trace the card usage to various locations, and there were images of my mother buying things at the time shown on the statements and never me. She denied it all and said I had put her up to it because I was bad to the core just like Dad. It could easily be proven that I never spoke to my mom at any time around then when the money was being spent. In fact, I had cut contact with her, and the only messages and calls to my phone, well, they were from her and never returned by me. Even in the end, when she was found guilty of all charges of fraud and causing serious bodily injury while driving drunk, she maintained it was all my fault or my father's, or the man that she was seeing at the time. Nothing was ever her fault. She was just one of life's victims, according to her own statement. The judge disagreed, and she was found guilty because she could not repay the money. And the guy she injured pressed charges. She was sent to prison for 3 years, which in my opinion is not long enough, as the other driver had life-changing injuries. I spoke to him after the verdict just to apologize, but he smiled and said I had nothing to apologize for. I'm hurt and sad that my mother genuinely hates me so much, and I think she always did. It's such a relief that my dad and Jess were there for me when I needed them the most, and will always be there for me. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a biological mother anymore. I have Jess, who will always be a better mother than my biological mother ever was. I guess if I've learned anything from this, it was to look after yourself and your identity, because someone could be pretending to be you, and it's hard to clear your own name. Wow, I have not read such a toxic story in quite some time. It turns out that OP had everything identity stolen. I'm just glad the mother at the end of this story was caught red-handed and sentenced to time in jail. Let me know if you've ever been in any situation like this. where maybe your credit was stolen or some sort of identity fraud. I would like to hear your story, your personal opinion, and all your encounters in the comment section down below, and let me know, what would you do in this story if you were OP and were basically lied to your entire life about your father, only to find out that the truth was far from what you thought it was? Once again, thank you for joining me on today's video. I hope you enjoyed the content. If you're new to the channel, my name's Mr. Reddito. Thank you so much. Consider subscribing, and I will see you tomorrow. Peace!